Hello, everyone. Greatness begins from where you are. What I would like to talk about today is just this simple scene that man can become aware of, and you can see it in a lot of movie scenes, and also when you really look into the biographies of some of the most interesting human beings who have lived, you see that the human being who at first does not know and acknowledges his lack of knowing will find himself in a space where he doesn't want anything. So greatness is not even close to the view of the person or the being that is really actually originating into greatness. So what that could mean is that you might get hit by life in a way where if you were trying one path, you might see that you are not fit for that path. And it's not that you had to push yourself, it's just that sometimes it seems that life really gives you a mirror to see what's wrong. And sometimes some of the decisions that a human being makes will look wrong if he is not where he feels he should be now. So the feeling aspect, which is aware of the novelty of the moment, is recreating with the sense of past what a sense of wrong could mean. And the sense of wrong is in actuality just a suggestion of where you are. I want you to visualize two different kids who are in, let's say, in a garden or a cottage. I want you to visualize two kids, right? And it's the same kid. Now, once this same kid, in one version, he is chasing a butterfly and he's running after it. He's using all his logic, rationality, and just force and skill and all that he can muster to try to catch this butterfly. And it seems somehow the butterfly dodges it. And when you see that you're chasing something, if in a minute you stop chasing that thing, you will see that it has gone forward, and it's as if you were never meant to have that thing, because the intensity of how to maintain a certain reality was too intense for the natural resonance of the being, you know? So this is visualized putting a gentle person who's lived a gentle life suddenly in a battlefield, you know? So he will see that he's not made for the battlefield unless he's constantly creating with his world and is aware of what's really working here. The moment of experience that a being does not have what is the profundity of any form of allowance for a new concept to take steps into greater action, you know? What that means is the other version of the kid, if he stopped chasing the butterfly, and you would see if the kid goes and sits down by the flowers, he would sit there and he would see, all right, I'm not chasing the butterfly, but at the same time, why did I even need a butterfly? And so the kid goes into this sense of thought and comes down to this sense of peaceful being where life never needed anything from life because it was just alive. And so it's that moment where that kid suddenly sees, instead of one butterfly, a bunch of butterflies just come around him because they are naturally going to where the flowers are. And as the kid has gently understood in his lotus wisdom, he sees. The being becomes aware, and so the butterflies land on your shoulder. They land on your forehead. Simply suggesting this imagery, we really need to see that when you stop searching for a certain certainty, you give yourself a moment of stillness and silence where you are just existential observance, and it's as if the only task that life is asking for you is to breathe. The rest is made based on how you are interpreting everything, based on how there's a sense of identity that is a thinker, but when we look at the thinker, there's nothing there, and thought seems as void as the void in space. However, it is your intelligence which will realign and walk in greater ways. So that kid who was not doing anything, who he might have tried to do it in a certain manner, but when life pushed him back and said, no, this is not your time, you need to still walk a little more before you can go into that great role. You saw that it was as if the individual, in his breaking of one reality, gains the maturity needed to reconceptualize a sense of identity in a greater way. What that means is when a person gets confronted by life, it may not be comfortable, but what is comforting is the existential ability you have as a human being to confront life after. And not just only as a human being, because the human ideas are relevant to what is around you. What that means is if you go in nature, you begin to see that its simplicity will take away a lot of complex patterns of thought that are constantly making the human being a certain kind of individual. Because a speaker of life knows that there is no audience aside from the total awareness that a being can have to the moment of experience, to the moment of existence. So we are not trying to align with what we have consciously, objectively assigned a certain value to. We are simply working with the nature of our ability to be conscious of anything. And this means that this lesson is not a lesson. It is very simple that if you were sitting now, the only perhaps instructions was to be self-aware in an untouched manner. And you see, what is an untouched state of being suggests? It's a state of being that never needed to move to know itself. It was as it's knowing. You see, right now, because man has different aspects in his mind in regards to conscious and unconscious, his tutelage is even shaped. What that means is you as a being, as a multidimensional being, are not receiving multidimensional teachings consciously because you're not allowing yourself to see beyond a certain dimension. So what this means is that you just simply need to go to nature and realize that there's no time limit here, okay? Even though we are temporal beings and, you have perhaps 100 years to, dance around, but you begin to see the search is the search for why even ideology? Why even this? And you see that when you go to that depth of question, regardless of whatever orientation of thought you have or where you've been raised and what your conditioning is, your conditioning is being challenged by not an enemy, but your nature of being. So a natural flow is coming with your, and trying to, in a sense, work with your pattern sense of accumulating reality. That means that you are not seeking compatibility for an idea or even for a physical body. You are seeking to, in your being quiet and just being here, an awareness that all these shapes and memories and thoughts and senses of to be someone are, it's not that they go away, it's that you are acknowledging more than what's in front of you, what's more than what's on the table. And so the experience of the being is direct when it's aware of its being. But when it's doing something, it projects into subtler forms where you will see, you think you're a certain somebody, but when a bunch of people talk to you and you're talking to them, you will see that the capacity of each individual is different to see another individual. But the capacity for an individual to be its collective knowing is always there. It is infinite. It can be done beyond space and time, for what you are seeking is beyond the sense of space and time having to be shaped. What that means is the focus of the camera lens can change, and in doing so, you will see you're not the camera. And so perhaps this body first finds its presence also in how it's a subtler body of thought. Trust me, any physicality here that is moving, movement is a physicality being more liquefied in regards to how it's being projected in a subtler way from thought. What that means is, at first, there is this very profound, deep question of the human experience of whether is it thought that's originating physicality, or is it physicality that is originating thought? And you truly see that if you don't choose to step into the pool, if you don't choose to run into the forest and go direct through your own self-exploration and self-awareness and direct experience, figure this out, you will be left behind from what you actually are. Do you know? Sometimes people who search in Google for certain things that they need to go directly understand will realize that they are not even letting a new student of action to be born, because you are assuming that you know what to do before you have gone into it. And you will see that your greatest ability comes when you assume you don't know anything and you're just going there from the present moment, receiving and handling your sense of ability here again, you know? Words become meaningful when they are no longer words, and you simply look at the nature of the phenomena of your moment, and there is a grace in how this existence keeps itself. Just like that moment where perhaps someone suited up, you know, and fixed his tie in front of the mirror, was the same as how the nature of how this tree sprouts out of this ground in light, basking in light, shapes itself up. When you pay attention to reality and existence, it is constantly aligning itself, because an aspect of experiencing this plane of existence can be very real, that it is not just physical. What that means is a lot of us are in the sandbox of space and time, and we're all, we have some people bring buckets from somewhere else, some people bring certain, shovels and whatever, and everybody comes here. Some people are trying to figure out what the newest invention is, but at the same time, we're all in the sandbox of space and time, and we're making it. And it's that moment where it's as if the human being has just taken a bit of the sand and is seeing the sand go out of his fingers before wanting to build anything with it, and he's realized, and he's saying, wait a minute. My presence in the sandbox is an intelligence beyond the boxes of conception, ideology, conditioning, and frameworks of thought I am in. You can navigate, or you can be within a state of your sense of being aware to yourself that there is no self present, but direct experience of, how do I say it, how abstraction, just like raindrops, is pouring on manifestation to give you cognitions of a limitless sky. And if you are not aware of your emptiness, it seems that you cannot be aware of the fullness of life. What that means is that moment where that person or that very that moment when that kid finished his meal and went on TV and saw an ad of poverty of different people in Africa, it seems that there is never a satisfying meal until world hunger is gone, Because life is here to be alive, not objective rule. What that means is we have no right to hurt other beings, just to change someone's eyes suddenly, to squash an ant or to look through the barrel of a gun. We are here to be aware that life is the one who is here to experience. And so you must become aware of your livelihood beyond objectivity. But this does not mean change. This means be aware of change. What that means is you cannot read a single thing and be exactly where you are, even though reading does help you a lot in regards to creating, helping you with navigation in worlds of abstraction, but in regards to your thoughts and what thought is, you can be sitting on a couch and you can never move from that couch, and you will see, if you are self-aware, you will begin asking yourself such profound existential questions that you will get off your seat and you'll go exactly where you need to be. You know? What that means is that the only emergency is lack of awareness to what you are. For in being aware of what you are, the ability does not need to even be given. It is there. Nature seems to blend the voice of scripture and science into stillness, where a new entrance into those same ideologies can be done. There have been so many times where I remember I would read a quote, I would just read some quote, some interesting quote, and years would go by, let's say like the next year I would come and the quote would have totally different meaning. And it would totally give me this understanding that what you see is based on what you are aware of. And if you are not allowing yourself, if you're judging before reality has opened up to you, you have closed the door before even realizing it's a door. Give yourself a moment of absolute being, and then acknowledge how much this needs interpretation or not. Because there was a way where when I was younger, I was seeking knowledge and stuff in a way that was it was just like seeking fast food. You don't want knowledge, to be like fast food. You want knowledge to be something that you're receiving in your natural state, which is a simple sense of existential comfort. What that means is when you look at the realized beings, when you look at what the Buddha received, it was existential comfort. It was not ideology. It was an existential comfort beyond the objective and subjective projections. And you truly see stillness and silence is healing. You can be angry. You can be someone, let's say, let's say, you can be someone who will be hitting man, and you will see that if you stopped, even if you were a hitman, if you just stopped everything you were doing and you went into nature, you would begin to realize that you don't have to do anything, because the sense of doingness is all coming from a response to an individual conception that thinks it cannot survive. Before man dies, the concept of death must die. And you must begin to see even ideas are transcendental gateways to new senses of being. Be tolerant and patient and see that greatness must come from the sincerity of your being. What that means is you want whatever you want to do, regardless of how much people are telling you can do it or you can't do it. First, take yourself to a moment of sincerity and honesty, where your clarity is coming based on how you are feeling. in this life of what is right or wrong. And then take natural steps and begin to allow yourself to project discipline. Something that I forget, even sometimes now, is that, but it constantly comes back. It's as if the lesson needs to be seen before it leaves, needs to be acknowledged before it exits your life. You must not choose, but engage consciously without any reason with your moment to clearly see its potential. Improv is there to show you what you have to do when there are no plans. Once you become comfortable, then you will be able to bring a discipline that cannot be bothered by anything. For the value of your task is something you have seen, and that is why you must communicate it. You are a unique voice of how you are a human being here. Communicate it authentically, and in that authenticity, your greatness was something that was always something that it was based on you. Because if you fake it till you make it, you will, when confronted by a problem, not have the hope because you do not have the clarity of the vision. But when you accept what you are, regardless of what your face looks like, what the face of your ideas and truths look like, what the face of your conditioning looks like, and you simply stand in a presence that breaks all masks, every moment of your life is the meaning of your life. And so the quality of this awareness will show that you do not need to be worried about your greatness. Life is guiding you where you need to anyways. And your greatness will be in the acceptance of all that you are. For without accepting all that you are, you can never be all that you can be. And it's very important for man to understand the notions and concepts of, especially how many people have said, props to Ram Dass and Eckhart Tolle, in regards to being here and now. Because the human being is really seeing that it can either choose to make itself really objective, but it will see it will not be able to complete. No one can be an atheist, because after death there is no atheist. Do you see? Or let me say it like this: no one is anything because the nature of thingness is based on a sense of awareness without thing. So absence really provides the space for manifest form. When you become aware of the nature of absence, man, again, no longer can be objective, no longer can just be subjective, but is always the pure, absolute consciousness that is within all being. This does not have a frame, and so it cannot walk gracefully into the realm of language. It can very poetically enter the realm of language. What that means is poetry is the realized being in the dullness of terminology. It is an enlightenment of duality having to be just in the same way. Because there's something very phenomenal about looking at the concept of language. You see, we've been using a language for a while, and so it's developed, and now we have it like the way we're using it now. But do we want to use the same language for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, or is the capacity of communication going to enhance? Studying human communication, and not just like words, just a human existential communication, human experiential communication, you are moving from a normal communicator to being an advanced communicator, because you are observing the normal to a degree that the inspiration of your eyes opening is beyond the limitation. Do you see? Fear is not in the same room. Fear and doubt cannot pass certain rooms of self-awareness, and you simply are just situated in existential comfort. But again, you must realize this all does not mean that it's only like something that a human being can do. And that's why self-help books will never be enough, because there needs to be an experiential attainment. And again, where else can experiential attainment begin? Here and now, as you have always been. The fact that human beings have even realized the concept of here and now is the greatest gift and is the promise of the future. The minute I realized what Buddha did, it's like I wasn't worried about an apocalypse. Because once you realize the nature of vision, you are not lost to the objects that are in your vision. And when you look at the body, I mean, when I sat down in nature, and I assumed that, let's assume I could judge nothing because I didn't know language. I just assumed, let me assume if I didn't know language, and let me just assume that moment before, when I was young in my youth, how did I see it before language? And I noticed that I had no judgments. And because I had no judgments, there was no judgment day. And the simplicity in observing life as life is the greatest revelation. For only self can reveal the truth that is within other. And you shall see. Greatness always begins without greatness, because it is not the greatness of a human idea. It is the greatness of an act of life. You see the greatest leaders, the greatest speeches, it was the moment the speech was made. It didn't matter what the story was. That moment when Martin Luther King gave his speech, that moment when Gandhi gave his speech, that moment when a human being communicated beyond an individual consciousness. And it was the moment, that means it's not that the planets were aligned, but it was as if the thoughts, the ability, all the memories and experiences of the speaker, and all those audiences who just felt like they had to go out that day, all coming together to be one moment where all life is present, even without a moment of space and time. Think of that moment when the greatest speech, the last words of the speech was given, and that instant of silence. It was as if the human species woke up. The humanity woke up. And in that wakefulness, there can stand no tyranny. For you are the eyes of the greatness of life. You become the action of life, and that moment becomes of trust. There's a very beautiful story about Gandhi, that he was sitting meditating at a very critical moment, and suddenly this man comes to him and knocks. He's like, Gandhi, everyone's waiting. What are we going to do? And it was after a very, opposition-like response from the other side. And Gandhi's standing there, and he's like, I don't know the answer, that hasn't come to me. It'll come to me. Just let me be in silence. And Gandhi sat in meditation. And he closed his eyes, and this is where Mr. Within would just like to give, of course, his view on what Gandhi could perhaps was thinking in that moment, Gandhi sat there, in silence and stillness. And if I have seen him properly now as who he really was, there was no words. He was looking for the strongest impulse that intuition could bring him. And I'm sure Gandhi in his life probably lived a very spiritual life, but not a spirituality that could be named. So if you asked him about the spirit, he would tell you, don't ask too much. And he stood there, and suddenly a knowing is found within him. He gets up, he opens the door. Everybody is looking. He begins walking. As his steps begin to walk with a firmness that is this, as if this human leader is a leader 1,000 years ahead of what humanity could confront then, he walks up to the beach and picks up the illegal sand, if I'm correct, which had no reason to be illegal, and he stands there through non-violent action, but non-violent action stirred by the intuition of a silent, of a knowing that landed through silence and stillness. And what that meant is that that man came in there and told Gandhi, what should we do? And he had no idea, and he probably could not even see how there would be hope out of what Gandhi could do in that moment. But Gandhi seemed to be aligned with a transcendental wisdom that knew that he knew what was wrong, not because of the ideas of right and wrong, because of the clarity of the absolute vision that just on some existential level knew what was wrong, regardless of how much you could say it was right or wrong. There are some things you know as a being that no externality can touch. And once you see you were great before having to be great, you bask in greatness. You walk with greatness. This greatness is the most intuitive sense of just being alive, and your breath is your guide. What that means is you're no longer like perhaps a Napoleon on a horse, but you are a leader in which your generals and your army is the breath of life. You are guided by how you are alive. And that is a wisdom that if this is activated in a human being, you will not just see every yogi and mystic who has stepped into space and time slow hand clap for you. You will know through a sense of formless, compassionate presence that the light in our eyes was never in anywhere. You are an existential intelligence, cosmic intelligence, beyond the confrontation of the dissolution of your idea. As you no longer chase, the butterfly will land on your forehead, and you will begin taking very profound steps towards your greatest experience, sincerely and honestly. And you will see that perhaps you will find the action that is beyond words. And what happened there when Gandhi was there, or any being who has done, or who has taken the task of being the face of great change, even though that face was changing and breaking. Greatness begins without greatness. For you to see that the nature of life is great. The nature of humanity, how you are a human being, is the profundity of your greatness. How you are a human being is the glory of God. How you are a human being is the brightest, is the last ink drop on the greatest theory of science known to man. In regards to a unified being. Be, and you shall be aware of all that is done. Much blessings and namaste.